Yeah, thank you so much for this webinar on wellness. And I don't know why you chose on me as the speaker, but I believe I will attempt just three things that I will say that maybe as also part of disclosure. One is that I saw you already wrote, I was one of the founder presidents of MSAKE. Number two is that I don't think that wellness is taken quite seriously, and many people look at the health side rather than the wellness side. And we almost have sick care systems, not health systems. And people wait to be sick, and then we struggle to try and restore them back to what we think is health, but it's not even a position of health. And so prevention is always better than cure. And three is that I am a principal investigator in health workforce well-being study. I managing a grant for a study that is looking at the well-being of workers in Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. So I believe things are aligning for me to give this topic. So I will be extremely brief because this is a huge topic and there is no end to it. It is also a topic that practice makes perfect, in terms of you have to be doing something. And so I chose the topic healthy studying and how to cope in medical school, because there's quite a lot of things. We will just discuss three key things, but before I go there, I want to start by this topic about Jim Elliot. So many of you who are in this presentation, this webinar, there's a reason why you are here. So Jim Elliot said that wherever you are, be all there. Like, just make sure you are all there, like the whole of you is there. And I'll tell you one thing about medical school. So medical school is quite rigorous. Of course, you already know it. There is the stress of exams and all of these things that you have to balance. But you know what? Just like everything else, every success is only satisfactory and sustainable if the mind, body, and soul are kept healthy after the work that led to the success. Otherwise, if you succeed, but then at the end of the success, your body is weary, your mind is tired, you're not in a position even to enjoy that success. So then you start asking yourself, for what? What was the purpose of doing all of this? And so these key concepts about being all there, and the fact that after the success, the satisfaction and the sustainability is only possible if you are healthy, are key concepts that you should have in medical school, and how you approach your career. And so I will talk about healthy studying. I will talk about how to cope with your exams, and then we'll briefly go to your questions. And of course, I've already seen a lot of some of the concerns around stress, examinations, and things like that. So I will start by giving my own story. So I was at Moi University for my undergraduate, and then the University of Nairobi for my postgraduate. I cannot claim that I have been a good or a perfect student. Many of my classmates would say that I was one of those students who were a bit too studious, like you'd study a bit more, but that was only in the early years of my career, the first, second, and third year, the science-based years. And then from fourth year, fifth year, and sixth year, I then began to do a lot of things. I went into student leadership. I traveled to many countries. I was doing community projects. I was playing badminton when my ankle joint would still allow it. And I did so many things. And in fact, I think from fourth year, there is not a single weekend I can say I was studying. Later, I went into postgraduate medical school, and postgraduate medical school is way difficult. They say internship is way difficult, but I think if you go into postgraduate medical school, then it's another world altogether. But I've been privileged. I was that time the Secretary General of the union, and the union is extremely busy with all this work going around in the counties, a lot of travel, a lot of pressure, a lot of threats. And then I was also doing my postgraduate. So you can imagine I'm doing my postgraduate and I'm leading the union, and it wasn't an easy thing. So the level of stress made me to learn to balance, not just about life, but to balance work, to balance my body, to balance my thinking. And more importantly, the lesson I'll teach you today is to prioritize. And then how to cope with pressure. So we'll start with one of the first nuggets around all being there, which is to empower your mind. And the statement is actually quite self-explanatory, that you need to empower your mind to fully focus on what you're doing at the moment. I think there's a bit of a reverse, but I should explain this in detail. Many of you are the best students they could ever be in this country, the best. So you go into high school, you work so hard. You know, high school, you can pass it just by working hard. Medical school, working hard is not enough. And I have to say this because many of you find that you have these huge volumes of material that you need to cover. You have a lot of pressure. You can't do extra work. You know, you're always falling behind. And I have written, if you Google millennials in medicine, how doctors of the future can change healthcare. I have written something 5 years ago about this. It's a lengthy, it's around 7 minutes of reading on the Africa Health Report. And the concentration to be there fully when you are doing something, like when you're supposed to be in class, you are in class, and then when you're supposed to be doing MSAKE activities, you're doing MSAKE activities. I think that dichotomy is where, just like in life, we find a lot of difficulty. And the key to the concentration here is the learning style. The key to this mind, that your mind is fully present, is actually the learning style. And I'll talk about the learning style because learning styles are unique to everyone. Now, most of you learned how to do timetables in high school, and then you learned how to schedule. Today I'm studying mathematics, tomorrow I'm studying physiology, the following day I'm studying geography and things like that. Then you come to med school, and then the topic you've been given for biochemistry is not enough for that night. And then then you have a class for physiology, and then you have a class for immunology, and you have a class for anatomy. And then you start to get confused. You start to wonder, is it that I'm not studying enough? So you have all these many books that you really have to read. And then you realize that you are just working at. So now, I think, I don't know whether this talk is useful to some of you that have even gotten to 6th year, because there's something that you have been doing for you to get to 6th year or to 5th year, those of you that are studying for your last exams. But the most important thing is actually a learning style. Now, this learning style, most people get it in their 2nd year. Some people get it in their 3rd year. Like sort of a pattern that works for you, you know? Now, we will notice that people will say that people are different, but actually the learning styles that make you survive in med school are actually not different, but we'll see that at the end of this presentation. And this learning style should be consistent, and you should review it so that you are the one making it efficient. It's like you are computerizing your own self on how you are studying, how you prioritize, how you plan, the amount of time you take, how you write notes, how you review your notes, how you revise, how you engage in discussions and things like that, and how you absorb and master, and how you test that you have actually gotten the lesson. And then you integrate and renew this through the day-to-day lives. You must have a hobby, you must have meals, must have rest, you must have relaxation, you must have relationships, you must have exercise, you must have time that you're just tired, you know. And so the thing about mastering learning styles is about assessing yourself in terms of what do you do currently. You're already in fourth year, you're already in fifth year, you're already in sixth year. Like, what did you do to get there? The thing is, did you struggle or did you struggle? Is it something that you need to change, the pros and the cons, or it's something that you want to continue with? And if you want to change it, what exactly were the specific parts of changing it? Is it that you start studying late? And also, if you are in your early years, the first year, especially in the second year, then you can still experiment and reassess, you know, and figure out, am I a better person when I read in the morning or in the evening? Am I a better person when I write or when I watch videos and things like that? And then we will learn about some of those things later. And then you strategize and document your goals. In writing, you have to say that this is my learning style and this is what I will do. So whether somebody wakes up at 2 a.m. in the night, for you, it is about what is it that works for you. And there are two resources here. Of course, one of them that you know from the education planner. You can just look at it, www.educationplanner.org. They have some students, and you can go through a very simple self-assessment and learning styles. And then there is also another website on how to study. How to study has a lot of things, so don't get lost in it and then distract yourself from medical thing. Just if you go to howtostudy.com, just go to study skills articles, and then you will review a few things. But of course, if you have time, especially those times that you're waiting for a meal, times that you're not reading anatomy, you can be looking at this kind of things and just try to assess yourself in terms of what is most useful. Then there is the whole area about making your learning style consistent and efficient. So here it's about creating a schedule really, and that you stick to your schedule. Now, I think at the beginning I should have said the reason why most of us struggle with studying, actually, there are only two reasons why we struggle with studying. One is that we do not know the full scope of what we were supposed to study. And two is that we did not prioritize. So the success is that you have to know the full scope of what you're supposed to study. So every medical school has a curriculum, okay? Now, many schools don't share the curriculum. It's there actually. Some of it is in your library, some of it is in your website, some of it, if you go, you will figure out the full curriculum. Forget about the topics that you will do, like we will do reproductive health, we will do respiratory system and this. Within that respiratory system, there is what is written. Yeah, although there are curriculums, can be the planned curriculum, the one that is documented, not the delivered curriculum. Now, if you look at that curriculum, you can try to create a schedule around it, your own schedule of study that then may also coincide with the schedule of classes and things like that, and then stick to it, okay? Set a timer, study in blocks. For me, who does not concentrate much, I always read something for 20 minutes and then I take a 2-minute or 5-minute break and then I continue, you know. For those of you that have long concentrations, I think you can go up to 40 minutes. It is very hard for somebody to lie to you that you can read continuously for 1 hour and that you are still concentrating and that you're still getting what you're reading without basically taking breaks. You can actually read for 3 hours, but then you have to do it in chunks, and then you have to redo exercises, because reading is about the environment. And I'll give you a very typical example. Many of you are on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Whatever you see on Instagram or TikTok, or when Dr. Oluga has written something on Facebook, you read it and you get it. And there are very little chances that you will forget it. But then when you are reading your Ganong principles of physiology or Muya's pathology, or then now you want to block the external environment, you want to block all your senses, and then you want to what we call sink into that book. But then you're doing yourself a disservice. The disservice you're doing is that you are dissociating with the same things that would allow you to remember. For example, if I am reading and I am reading in an environment, it depends on you whether you're a visual guy or audio or you associate with the environment, maybe cars passing or things like that. That is why when you allow yourself to flow freely, you get what is on Facebook. You read something on Facebook, but you never really forget it. And because when somebody reminds you, like, no, Dr. Oluga made a post, or the president said this or something. But then when it comes to academic, we want to block all our senses. And then you only want to use your visual and maybe the mental sense. And then all of these other senses that are supposed to help you in memory and mastery then cannot be applied. And so when it comes to the point of designing a schedule, designing the method of study, you have to look at the whole curriculum, and then you also have to look at then the methods that you are using. So, of course, I think many of you know how you are studying. Some of you do key points, you summarize, you make flashcards, you make tables. Personally, I write a lot of notes, I write such kind of notes. But I rarely read them. It is almost impossible that I go back to my books to read. So my learning style is very visual. As much as I am writing, I am just writing to make it sink, not for me to come back to it. I don't remember in the last 15 years ever going back to any of my notebooks to read. But then I try my best to have this photographic memory, and I try to write as a way of mastering it. And I will come to that in a moment. And so because of the nature of our minds, you should also schedule rest and rewards. Rest and rewards are like walks, breaks, some music, something creative, something that makes you come alive. If you want to cook, if you some people, although those are stress issues, either eat or things like that, but that's more on the stress side than on the creative side. And then you keep your whole brain active and healthy. So drinking enough water, making sure that you have a positive mental energy. You practice the art of creating balance in life. And I think that is really about the mind. And I will come back to just a bit of it at the end. Now, let me talk about empowering your body. So the key is that you have to keep healthy to be anything, whether you want to be a neurosurgeon or a cardiovascular, or you want to be the best researcher, Nobel Prize, you want to be a TV doctor, whatever it is, you will have to be alive. Now, let studying not kill you. And how can studying not kill you? 3 things that are very important. Nutrition, it needs to be balanced. You have to watch what you eat. You have to make sure that you are eating the right thing. You don't go into what we call the tea and snack syndrome, where you're just taking tea and snacks because, of course, if it's economic issues, that's a different thing, but not because you are just studying and you have no time to do anything. Then exercise, you must move the body. Now, the body's neurons, the body's memory, and the body state is helped so much by exercise that you would not know how much you need to clear your brain. So there are all these people that go to the gym, and they go to the gym just for mental energy, just for concentration, just to increase the amount of connection between the muscles and the neurons. And so and also the muscles is a muscle generally is a tool of longevity, So how much you live depends on how strong or your muscles are, and this is something that is also very important. So whatever you want to achieve in life, you have to be healthy. Then sleep. People will tell you, oh, me, I'm a late night person, me, I'm a blah, blah, blah. And this is what I said we'll talk about. It has been found, early to bed, early to rise. That's what works. Otherwise, then the following day, you are grumpy. So when people are supposed to be concentrating in class, you're not concentrating in class. So what happens is that then you will have to spend more time again in the night doing things that people did in the day. And then the following day, you are again there just a zombie in class. And then you have to spend a lot more time doing things that people did in the day. Okay? So I think what works for many people is that you have to have adequate sleep. And rest is a responsibility. It's not a privilege. Rest is a responsibility. Rest is a choice, and it requires intentional boundary, saying yes to something that will help you advance your studies. And this is what I was saying, that staying up late in the night is borrowing time for tomorrow. And you are always paying it back. You're paying it back by being unplanned, by being late, by repeating what people have done. So your time is not fully utilized. So you are not on the first step that we said, that your mind should be fully present. Now, your body should also be fully present. And your body can only be fully present if it is healthy. You don't have aches, you are not lethargic. I mean, you're trying to study, but you're sleepy, you know? Why? You know, because you didn't have enough rest, or you have not scheduled enough rest. Now, of course, most of you are either in, you're very young, so most of you are still very active, but try to really stand, stretch, walk, you know, and ensure that your body is well energized. And then we come to the third bit, which is about the soul. Try to make sure that you empower your soul to be at peace with the present. And what do we mean here? The key is that you're in a state of wellness, and that's what I mentioned earlier. So self-awareness, checking in with yourself. Are you stressed? Are you feeling not quote unquote in the mood, and things like that? So make sure that you are always checking in with yourself. Like for me, I rarely read when I'm not in the mood. So I'd rather go and relax my mind, do some mindfulness, you know, exercise so that I release the tension, or take a walk, or listen to music, or if I have a problem, call somebody, share the problem. You know, you have to get out of that, because then you're trying to force yourself to read, but then you have also this baggage in the head. It's not gonna come. You will spend the whole night reading that ganong, and trust me, you'll have to repeat it. And that's a waste of your time. And you know, when you're supposed to, when you will be repeating it, you'll be repeating it a night before the exam. And then feeling stressed, feeling anxious that you have not prepared enough. Know your purpose. Why are you in medical school? How did you get there? I have made a presentation before for those of you that, for example, are in Kenyatta University or the University of Nairobi, on what made you go to the medical school? Were you just confused, and you, a bright student, confused, you found yourself there? Were you looking at medicine at school? Were you coerced? Was it your choice? Whatever the reason, you're already in that pipeline, so you better find your purpose there. Whatever the reason, you can't keep saying, you know me, I was forced to do medicine by my parents. So you better find your reason. Now find your reason. Yes, you were forced to come, it was a coercion, but you are there, you know? So find a reason why you are there, and connect it with your head. Connect it with some divine purpose. That is, what am I looking forward to tomorrow? That is absolutely yours. Only you, not your parent, not your guardian, not the person paying your scholarship, not the expectations of somebody, not because your boyfriend or girlfriend is in that school. You. Because if you don't come to that sense of purpose, then already studying becomes a nightmare. Then you have to build a community. I mentioned that when you're in this state of anxiety, of not feeling good, who do you run to? Who is your anchor? Who is your support system? Do you call your mother? Do you call your father? Do you call your brother? Do you call your girlfriend? Do you call your somebody? Who are your friends? Who do you share with? Who do you release the tension with? Because that's also very important. And I'll tell you that from today, take what resonates with you. And then you follow the strategies that help you be mindful. Mindfulness is the state of bringing your whole soul to what you're doing. You empower it, you give it energy, so that then it's aware of its environment, it has a purpose. You're not a walking dead. You're not just going to class because there's a biochemistry class. You have something that you're looking forward to, you know. And it's not always an easy option, especially at the beginning, but potentially it has significant benefits that we need to look at. And of course, medical school has a lot of pressure. I've just talked about the pressure, which is there's biochemistry, there's physiology, there's a lot, and there's volumes. And perhaps you've not looked at the curriculum. You don't even know what your scope is. Your lecturers are also so busy, maybe looking up for money. So they come, they give you all these assignments, or they just dump a lot of PowerPoint presentations. They're not explaining anything. They're not guiding you. You go to these YouTube places or Lecturio or the other applications that you use, and you're not getting it, and there's so much that you need to do that you begin to tremor because you have all of these things. There are those students that used to study with books all over. If you go to their room, there's an anatomy book somewhere open near the door, and then there's a physiology book, and then there is and it's the night before exams. You can't do that. So how do you cope? The one thing I'll tell you, which I think we should have known all from first year, that speed is how fast you're moving, but velocity is the direction. Now, what determines speed versus velocity is priorities. What is your choice? What did you choose? Okay. And so this one I mentioned that in high school, we learned to do all the hard work. And then in med school, we all of a sudden fail. Why? Because we never learned something called prioritization. We may have learned planning, that on Monday I'll do mathematics. On Tuesday, I will do chemistry. On Thursday, I will do geography. What if the mathematics is so much? So we are trying to say that on Monday, I'll do biochemistry. On Tuesday, I'll do physiology. But then the content for biochemistry is so much, so you always find yourself falling behind. So you didn't finish that chapter. You have an assignment the following day. There is some circuit thing you have to do. There is work at home. Some of you have to do work online because help did not come. So there's a lot of things. And the lesson is prioritization. But even within prioritization, then you have to learn something called mastery. So don't just move fast, move in a particular direction. Now, what is the direction that you are moving towards? Okay, this is what I will summarize it at. So the whole idea around studying and how to relieve pressure depends on these 6 things. Are you studying to remember? Are you studying to understand? Are you studying to apply? Are you studying to analyze, to evaluate, and to create? Now, let me tell you, this pyramid is so true for medical school as you move from first year to 6th year. Or let me say that it is so true in the life of a doctor. When you get into first year, your most important things is to recall the facts and the basic concepts. So you define, you duplicate, you list, you memorize, you repeat, you state. This is where you use mnemonics and things like that. When you're starting to move to 3rd year, things begin to make sense. Now you are understanding. So 1st, 2nd year is mainly memory, recall, Then now you begin to understand things. Some of you start understanding early, 1st, 2nd year. You begin to now explain ideas. Finally, you can make sense out of, a breathing cycle. Finally, you can make sense out of asthma. You can explain some pathophysiology. You can connect A plus B plus C and know why corticosteroids are used here, things like that. Then as you go to 4th year, you are expected now to start applying. So now you're supposed to now use this information. You may just be a junior student, you're clerking, but to the patient you're talking to, you're supposed to use some information. Even when you are presenting to me as a 6th year student or as an intern or as a medical officer or as your consultant, I expect you to have made some sense in terms of what you would do, So that's where application starts. And then as you go further, especially 5th year, 6th year, now you start to analyze. Now you draw connections. among the ideas, you differentiate, you organize, you relate. Now you want to contrast, you want to distinguish, you want to explain why this is cerebral malaria and not meningitis, based on the presentation, the pathophysiology, the physiology that you read, the immunology, based on the laboratory results and all of those kind of things. Now you're connecting systems, you're evaluating, you're now making sense. You're not just applying it, So you're not just listing some things about differential diagnosis. Now you're starting to be different. And then now when you go into being a doctor, you have to justify and justify your stand or a decision in terms of you have now done a critical appraisal. You can now argue and defend that, say, no, now for sure, my differential is not just cerebral malaria, meningitis, blah, 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 or any, you stop talking about things like space-occupied lesion. You start saying, I think there's a mass in the brain, and I think it's in this area, and I think it's affecting this now. So this is actually the progression of learning. Now, let me apply it to your situation. Now, when you start reading, when you are attending a lecture, when the lecturer is speaking, what you need to do is to remember. What did he say we should read? Which resources? Where? What are the topics? When you go to study by yourself, you're supposed to understand. When you are revising with your colleagues, you're doing a material for the second time, or you're now testing yourself in a questionnaire or a question paper, or there's all of, you're supposed to apply. Okay? Then now you go to discussion groups and things like that. Now you're supposed to start analyzing. You're supposed to explain to your colleagues why your answer is A and not C. So this is the progression, really. So that it is not just about memory. And I'll tell you that important lessons and people who really do not struggle with studying, they do one thing: they master. They master, not just memorize. So you must learn to master, because most of us struggle because we memorize. And there's nothing wrong with memorization, but there's only a certain capacity to the memory. Unfortunately, your brain is not as huge as you think. So we have to learn to master. And mastering comes from not just doing a lot of work, but learning the priority of really what to study. And after learning what to study, you really have to go deep into understanding, analyzing, then the concept sticks. So it doesn't matter. Once you learn the Krebs cycle, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're woken up, you don't have to revise it the night before. I told you guys, and when I was preparing for this lecture, is when I understood what I have been doing. And I am not blowing a trumpet, but for sure, I've not been a person who can read, like, really, what is it called? The last night people, that you have to do something a night before. In fact, Jared will bear me witness that I sent him this presentation 2 days before today, because I like to do things early, and then I like to understand what I am doing. And then, so that it doesn't matter whenever you wake me up, I will somehow get it. And I like to relax myself. I like to connect with my environment. So in work, there's something we call deep work and light work or shallow work. In learning, there's also something called deep learning. I think for those of you that are also in IT, you know deep machine learning and those kind of things. So deep work means that when you're doing something for the first time and you have to give it all your energy, the mind, the body, the soul, everything, all of it there. And then you put all of it together, you absorb it for memory, but more importantly, for mastery. Then now there is shallow study. Shallow study is now you're going for your lunch, now unapitia tu, because you just want to remind yourself. You want to just check whether that concept really got in, you know. And so these are the things that you do in light activity. So now that is also something that you need to realize. When is your deep work and when is your light work? Because many people have not differentiated. At what point am I doing serious studies? And at what point am I not doing serious studies? So you find guys who every time they're doing serious studies, you know, and at what point am I not doing serious studies? But I think what I've mentioned to you is that preclinical exams often test your memory because it just tests the things that you can remember. That is the biochemistries and the anatomies and things like that. Now, while memorization is really nice, is really nice, it will not take you through med school. And if it does, you will start to struggle to be a doctor. What you really need to do is that you need to learn how to apply, to analyze, to evaluate, and to create. Now, creation is for people like us now, like those of us are designing studies or health workforce well-being. So it's not just about what I'm talking to you about wellness. I also have to think around it and see, how do I design a questionnaire that can measure wellness in a doctor, a nurse, a clinical officer in Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana? No, that's creation, you know? And how do I come up with concepts that can then help other people who want to help doctors, nurses who are stressed and who are having burnout to have programs that can then help them? So this actually really summarizes what we need to do. This is called a memory curve. Now, a memory curve, the one in red, shows how quickly you forget. So assume that this, the first line here is day 1. I don't know whether you can see my cursor. Then this is day 2. Then this is day 3. This is day 4. This is day 5. So if you read here, yeah, and you don't do anything about it, yeah, especially if you just read, yeah, you memorized. This is by the end of day 1, you can only remember half of what you did. By the end of day 5, you can see you are nearing 10%. And in 1 week's time, you only remember that you read. You don't remember what you read. So it's like, oh, by the way, I read that topic. What? You start slapping yourself. So that is why you always have to have a studying style that helps you to master. So you have a deep study, and then you almost immediately follow it with some shallow study. So a shallow study, one of the things I used to do, and I don't know about you guys, is that when I used to read, then when I go to the shower, I would try to sort of either remind myself, and then when you're taking your breakfast, then you start to have those key points, the flashcards or the key concepts, you know, whether it's after 24 hours, you have done your day, you're just trying to remember, just take 5 minutes. And nowadays, you guys have technology, you have those tools, you have a lot of things that can help you do flashcards. And then you reinforce it a third day, a fourth day. See the way the memory becomes? So that by the time exams are coming, trust me, you will not be able to forget that. And you will not be anxious. Because when you do mastery plus repetition, you make it habitual. Now, somebody is going to ask me, how can I do this with all the topics that I'm reading? That's why you need to prioritize. Because if I read biochemistry deeply for 1 hour, okay, and then let's say in the afternoon, I read another topic of physiology deeply for another 1 hour. That's just 2 hours, okay? Now,
Let's give Dr. Oluga a minute to rejoin the meeting. Meanwhile, you can be typing your questions in the chat.
The explaining the curve of memory and yeah, and basically the difference between mastery and mastery plus retention, and how you can improve retention and make it habitual. And I was mentioning about the light reviews, which could be frequented on light moments, not necessarily on the deep studies, and which can be integrated more to make better and to make you have fewer stress in terms of memory. So, and that leads us to examination stress, which is are you trying to create your own self-talks? You know, examination stress basically is a pattern. So it's, of course, all of us, it's not that there's anyone who is always very comfortable with exams, but you don't have to put yourself in a default mode where you are always anxious. And anxiety comes from a feeling of inadequacy. And this happens even for doctors. So there's this nice picture around a first year not feeling adequate, a second year, and all the way to a sixth year, an intern, then a medical officer, then a registrar, then a consultant, and a consultant not feeling. So doctors are in constant state of not feeling adequate. That means that you're always constantly producing high levels of catecholamines, your blood pressure, you're feeling inadequate, you're always trying to be perfect. Of course, we call it perfectionism. But generally, you need to reduce that, and by creating a pattern of self-talk that is very reassuring. And then you have a relationship with your self-talk, because this is where stress comes from. And then you stop sabotaging yourself. And there are three main things that you need to do. One is let go. Basically, this attachment to perfectionism, we need to let it go. Then we need to accept. And acceptance comes from noticing and tolerating uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. Yes, I have not studied, but what do I do about it? The only thing I can do about it is to reprioritize and then study, so that then you're not pumping yourself with negative feelings. Then you have to improve tolerance, soften your attitude, and prevent escalating it. So once you start to tolerate, then you calm down. Okay, I may not have read, but what is it that I can do right now? What is it that I can do right now? Of course, if you've not read, you've also not read. You know, I mean, there's very little you can do, really. You can't start reading a chapter a night before. So basically, this talk is very useful for people who are not nearing exams, and for people who already had some learning style that they just want to figure out how to reduce stress, how to get themselves into a mastery plus retention. Then there is this thing about permanence of thoughts. We have to get ourselves to a state of transience. So yes, your last exams you didn't do well, but that doesn't mean that you will always not do well. You got a -2 out of 30. I don't know whether they still do negative marking. During our time, they used to. But that doesn't mean that you can't just keep on. I got a negative actually at some point, and I just had to study hard for the next term. And then the presence of mind that we have talked about, the presence of mind. So sustaining focus and returning focus. When your focus shifts, you return your focus. And the presence of mind has to come with the body and the soul. And so in summary, these are the 7 things that, of course, are very important in terms of your education that you have to look at. So spirituality just means the soul, in terms of that divine purpose, the higher being. What exactly do you want to look at? It does not necessarily mean if you are not religious, that is. But also if you're religious, a higher level that you look up to, because it can help you. So connecting your education, making sure that your stress is minimally managed. You have this higher sense of purpose. You exercise. You have nutrition. You connect. You are connected with the community, the people that are in a safe space. You have environmental awareness. And really, this is what I wanted to share. But then there is something small that I have to talk about just before we finish. Where is it? Something that I need to talk about. Share screen. I wanted to talk about I wanted to talk about this. I don't know whether, I hope you can see my screen. I wanted to talk about the psychological stress and the social factors and how that really relates to your body. And that's what we talked about in terms of immune markers. You know, when you take yourself through this stress, a lot of things happen. Now, I was actually reading something today about workplace wellness. I do a lot of organizations. I'm one of the designated health practitioners in the country. So many companies consult in terms of their workplace wellness or workers' wellness. And so you find that the people who are not well at work or that are chronically stressed also have more susceptibility to influenza or basically common cold, you know, and they get way sicker. So the susceptibility to infections increases, severity and progression of infections increases, even autoimmune issues become a big deal. The way you respond to immunization is a big deal. Allergy, you know, generally you all know about stress and the production of the conditions that then make disease quite available for the body. And that is why it is very important that when you are doing when you are studying, you don't subject yourself to prolonged stress, because prolonged stress leads to wear and tear on the body. And this is quite bad for your memory because it affects the hippocampal formation. Yeah. So basically, you're causing atrophy of nerve cells in the brain, and then your learning and memory becomes a problem. Yeah. So you are stressing yourself, but then the stressing of yourself, because of those long-term physiological changes, you're affecting your learning and your memory, and you're also affecting your working memory. Working memory is what we call the presence of the mind. So you're also affecting your ability to execute the function at that particular time, you know? So this is something that needs to really be understood by students, so that then you adopt more relaxation approaches. You adapt to things that then do not make you to have what we call a fear response. Yeah. And this is really about mindfulness. Yeah. Mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. Mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. Increasing your attention, increasing your concentration, increasing the sensory processing. The sensory processing of the things that the stimuli that is in the environment. Yeah. Yeah. Because if you don't do this, then now you go back to the increased activities in the prefrontal cortex. That prefrontal cortex is the one that is responsible for, at the particular time that you are reading, it's the one that is responsible for your working memory, the what we call remembering, you know, before you go to understanding. Now, understanding is now the hippocampus, the hippocampal formation, where you're looking at learning and memory. So before you go to that level, it's the prefrontal cortex. Now, if you get yourself stressed and you're not attentive, you're not concentrating, you're not processing the sensory stimuli within the environment, that's why I said that you have to relax. The same way you read Facebook, the same way you read Twitter, the same way you read TikTok, you know, you have to calm down and then just read. Just read the same way you read a novel. Yeah. But of course, you are interested not just in the memory, you're interested in the mastery. So because you're interested in the mastery, you are forming some notes. You are now, that depends on whether you're a visual person, whether you are a person who learns through audio, and all of these things are very important. So you have to reduce the mind wandering from place to place. And I'll just go very, very quickly in terms of, yeah, I think this is really detailed. This is really the science of it. And I don't think you needed the science of it. I don't think that you guys are into workplace wellness and the science of mental practice and the things that you need to do. I think what we really need to know is that 75% of nearly all medical students already develop burnout, so that by the time they are getting into internship, they are already spent goods, because they subjected themselves to this 6 years of chronic stress. And then they have so much fear, so much anxiety that 73% of them can even meet psychiatric morbidity on at least one occasion. That's a lot. That's a lot of people, That's a lot of people. And so I think what is really important is to know how to prevent stress, because the continuum is usually stress, then chronic stress, then burnout. After burnout, you're now moving to depression and then suicide. And these are things that are real. These are things that are real. Yeah, because then when you withdraw from that environment, you become okay. So I think what we are learning today is just how to cope within our environment, so that then you also reduce burnout. Burnout is described by these three symptoms: emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and then ineffective depersonalization generally, which then leads to ineffectiveness in whatever you are doing. And burnout is a critical thing, both in medical students, in doctors, and also in especially your consultants, nurses. And it starts all the way from the way we are designing our education system. So I think that is really all I want to share. I think that is really all I want to share. I think unless there are questions, I saw a few questions on the chat, which I think I can go to before we can wind up. This is also a very important slide. The whole issue around multitasking. I told you about guys who are doing multitasking, procrastination. Then you wire yourself to always this habit of distraction. They say that every 21 days, once you do something so much, then your brain starts to feel like that is what is normal. So it is hardwired to postpone things. And then the challenge is that you are rewarding yourself prematurely. And then when now the time will come for you to do all of these things, you find yourself very ineffective, because multitasking is actually not effective. It is switching from attention back and forth from different, and it is actually task switching. You don't achieve anything with multitasking. So learn to be present, learn to do one activity at a time, even if you're doing it for 20 minutes, for 40 minutes, for an hour, for 2 hours, learn to have the breaks. There is a slide I like to have, intensity versus consistency. Don't do something so intensely that then you burn out. You should do something consistently. Consistently means that for this 1 hour, I am in this presentation, I am absorbing it. I have a 10-minute break or a 20-minute break or a 5-minute break. I'm listening to music. I'm taking a walk. I am taking my tea. I am doing something and taking a jog. And when I come back, I am doing something different for this 1 hour, and I will be concentrating and I'll be writing notes. And tomorrow, just before I go for the shower, after the shower, immediately after lunch, before that small sleep comes, I will be doing 5 minutes of just trying to review what I read yesterday. And these are really the methods that then allow you to retain things and to keep what you have read and learned. I think that is really it. I think that is really it. I know that there's a lot of materials. Most of you will meet in the field because I do a lot of workplace wellness. I do a lot of also worker wellness and occupational health and safety. I mentioned to you that I'm a principal investigator in a study of health workforce well-being and how that leads to performance and retention. And we are doing it across Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. Unfortunately, I'm not interviewing students, but perhaps many of you who will be doctors, we will then find ways of interviewing you. I think that is all that there is to share tonight. And I want to thank you so much for inviting me. There is there is the questions that were coming, which I think I have shared most of them. Yes, here is the survey questions. Yeah, there are those of you that had asked about yeah, so basically these are the questions. I think some of them I already talked about. What specific challenges related to stress, anxiety, or burnout in medical school are you hoping to learn more about? Have you previously used any techniques to manage burnout, stress, or anxiety? If so, please share what worked well. Yeah, so I think you have to have something that you're doing. I mentioned quick breaks. You have to have people that you share with. Of course, sometimes we also go through very difficult situations, loss of loved ones, sickness. Sometimes things are also so difficult. That's why I mentioned the community. What's your safe space? What's your community? What's your friends? Do you have a spiritual system, people that you can pour out to this divine power that you look up to? Those of you that are Christians, prayers, and sharing with friends. They say a problem shared is a problem half solved. But more importantly, now when we will be going to workplace, when I go back to workplace wellness, of course we have the employee assistance programs, and one of the things about assistance programs is connectedness with the social environment. Social environment is the anchors, the support system. That is very, very important. And one of the things that we often establish, especially for employees that have chronic stress, that have chronic burnout, that are is to establish or try to teach them how to establish a social system. And that is the thing I will also leave you with tonight, that you have to establish a social system. A social system helps you to study, they help you with accountability, they help you remind you about some of these learning techniques, but they also relax you. For example, part one of my postgraduate studies, because I told you I was in the union and I was extremely busy and extremely stressed, but I had this discussion group that was so comforting, because every time I went there, they would encourage me, and of course I would always be behind in terms of my studies. Thank God, of course, I had learned how to study, so I don't do a lot of repetitive studies. And I don't know about you, I learned this when I was preparing this lecture to understand myself as well, that I actually don't do repetitive studies. I read more, I read about once, and then I just keep reviewing, humming and things like that. And then because I have photographic memory, I'm privileged to remember quite a lot. But I think now, having prepared this lecture, then I could see some of the methods that I use that are very important. Of course, healthy activity. Somebody has talked about swimming. Don't do alcohol and drugs. Of course, you are medical students, so you know things about alcohol. And many doctors, they go to alcohol, cigarettes, and even prescription drug misuse, things that we will now be talking about, because of anxiety. And then they get hooked to them because of the dopamine release. You want to be in this state where you are forgetting the things that you need. So the coping mechanisms are the same things we've talked about: work-life balance, connecting, swimming, running, taking a walk, taking a break, listening to music, going to ACT, going to the Christian Union, going to the mosque, something that connects you, distracts you, helps you be aware of the environment. And this thing about being aloof, we shouldn't also be aloof. If you're playing football, go play football. But the most important thing is that don't go play football, but you're thinking about biochemistry. When you're playing football, play football. When you are doing biochemistry, do biochemistry. Make sure you are in that moment. And if you don't have the energy to read, take a moment, reflect, diagnose yourself, connect with somebody, share with somebody, be in a state of mind that then you can, and then go back to the study. Because then you are wasting your time. You're studying, but you're not studying, Sleep well, sleep early, wake up early. The morning always works best. The morning always works best. And whenever you have a good sleep, I have never, even when I was Secretary General of the Union, I never ever lost a single night of sleep. I mean, I would stay very late sometimes because of negotiations, but I would still sleep my 8 hours because I consider sleep such an important aspect of my day-to-day productivity. Because if you don't sleep, I mean, then you're grumpy, you're not productive, you are late, you are lousy, you're not balanced, and then it just starts to mess up your day, it just starts to mess up your day. So there are all those materials about how to study. There are all those materials about education planner. There is issues we can talk about. I can also send you a lot more materials. There's this, although it's more from the United States, but there's some very good materials that I think I can share with you so that you share with everyone. It's about how to pass exams. I'm sure now that we also don't have a lot of jobs around, many of you will also be looking the USMLE way. So there's a material here is how a guide, the busy medical students guide. I think I'm not so sure you can get it online. The busy medical students guide to score higher on any exam. I think although you don't also want to distract yourself with reading this when you're supposed to read exams, but it's just 57 pages. It's something that you can read if you are me and you read just scanning like this one, you don't have to do very deep reading. Within 1 hour of a Sunday after church or a Friday after you're from prayers, you can always look at it and just look at some of the techniques that we talked about. As of course, as they say that if you didn't study, unfortunately, you can't study in one. There's no book that is going to tell you how to study the night before exams. So if you came here for such a lecture, sorry. I mean, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. The secret to excel in medical school, I already talked to you about speed versus velocity and basically what speed means and how you can prioritize and some of these important work that you need to do. So I can share with you this material and so that you share with everyone. And I think I want to wish you all the best in your studies and in all your endeavors. And I wish you good luck in being good doctors and being the best that you can be of citizens in this country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Oluga. Is there anyone with a burning question before we close the meeting? Maybe you can raise your hand. Bildad, I saw you raise your hand. Okay, there's somebody who has said something on the chat. Any final word of advice for 6th years about to do finals in 3 weeks, Daktari?
Yes, so the finals, 3 weeks is a long time. So this is which university mainly? Am I across all the universities?
Yeah, it's all universities in Kenya.
It's all university in Kenya. So 3 weeks is a long time, but 3 weeks is a very short time because they're going to test what you did from 1st year to 6th year. So you're not going to do medical school in 3 weeks. You have been doing medical school already. You have passed your exams. You've retained a lot of things. You've been discussing. So there's this residual knowledge that you have. I think as at now, the 3 weeks, for me, I would plan the 3 weeks alongside light studies. And light studies means that you would plan it around things that you already mastered or you already can remember, but you just want a light touch, you know, and unless there's some topics that you really have difficulties with. So this is, I will give 4 pieces of advice. One is that list the topics that you generally have difficulties with. Make sure you get done with those topics in the first week. Okay? If it is some pathophysiology or something, or you're not understanding COPD or bronchiectasis, you're not understanding appendicitis, or you're not understanding acute abdomen, or make sure you get that topic that you don't understand. Deal with it the first week. Deal with it. Make sure you do some deep learning around it. Now, the rest of the 3 weeks, schedule the topics and just do light touch reading, because I suppose you've already done deep learning, you already are remembering, or you already have master, so you just want retention. Okay. The last week, I would, apart from retention, I would spend more time learning how to interpret questions. And that is also another skill that we didn't talk about. Many times you read so much, you are so anxious, you pump yourself with all this knowledge, you get to read, all this management, you are arranging it, For example, you're arranging all this management, you're cramming all these things, and then you get to the exam. The question is such a simple question, but you never took time to learn how to interpret questions. And there are 3 concepts around interpreting questions. Number 1 is that read the full question. Number 2 is read it again. Now, the second time you're reading it, underline the keywords. Okay? Number 3 is then recollect along those keywords the one thing that you need to answer. Now, of course, some questions are quite long, and these are the questions that I was talking about, application questions or evaluation questions, which is the kind of questions you may get. I don't think at your level you get very long questions, but still, you underline the keywords, you read it first, then you read it a second time, you underline the keywords, and then now the third time, you're now trying to recollect all these keywords. What exactly are they? Okay, so this is something that I think you will also learn. There are all those MCQs around none of the above or all of the above. For example, if there's a question asking all of the above, you don't understand other choices, but you understand one choice. And so they said the following is not true. Okay, but you are for sure, you know that there's one thing here that is true, but the others you don't understand. Okay. Okay. They say the following is not true except, that means that all of these things are true. Then there's all of the above. So you know that there is something that is not all of the above. Don't choose that answer. Or the same with none of the above. So you say that there's something that for example. So that's how to try and answer MCQs. I don't know whether I'm confusing you guys. I think I'll need to reframe how we are talking about this. So you have 5 choices or 4 choices, and you don't understand the others, but you understand one. Yeah, you for sure know that this one is not true. Okay, then in such a case, then you really have to reflect on the all of the above or none of the above. I think that is usually the thing, so that you know whether the all of the above or none of the above is the answer. If you know that one of them is not true or one of them is true. And I think this book will talk to you about that. So basically, the last week I would talk about examination concepts, which is usually about how to interpret exams. or techniques for clinical setup, OSCEs and things like that. But I will spend the difficult times earlier than the exam. So if there are topics that I didn't understand, I would take the first week going through those topics, having the deep learning, stretching myself a bit. And then the second week, more of just light learning, revision, a lot of topics, rearranging things in your head. The third week towards the exam is how to interpret the questions, how to structure your answers. And I think you will do well because you've already reached sixth year, really. I think whatever methods got you there will get you out. I just hope that you're not struggling so much to get to the exam because, as I mentioned to you, most of us leave medical school when we're already damaged goods. I just showed you 75% of people are already burnt out. 73% are meeting some criteria for a psychiatric morbidity. I mean, this is something that must change. So I believe that those of you that were here, and especially if you are in your earlier years, second, third, fourth year, that you can begin to start to reflect. But even if you are in sixth year, that those 3 weeks are more meaningful to you. And later on, when you go into your postgraduate studies or you go into other studies or you go into work, you can apply better methods of keeping yourself well. Yeah. So I think that is it. And thank you so much for the time. We've taken quite a long time, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe all of us have a lot to now go and adapt to our own strategies. I've shared the MBCHB curriculum for Kenya. That's from KMPDC. Actually, it's one of the resources I usually use to revise if I have like maybe 2 weeks to go. So it might be useful in your own individual planning for long-term revision and planning as well. Otherwise, this is part one of this holistic webinar series. I've shared the link to the WhatsApp group, and you'll also be able to get the slides on your emails. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and you all have a good night. Unless there's somebody with something really burning. Yes, we're truly grateful, Dr.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Asanteni sana.